Right now, Indonesia is carving a brand new capital city out of the Borneo rainforest. It's called Nusantara, and it's supposed to cost $33 billion. But here's the problem. The buildings aren't finished. Civil servants refuse to move. Foreign investors are backing out. And the whole project is being called a ghost city before it even opens. Meanwhile, Malaysia already did this exact same thing 25 years ago, and it actually worked. Welcome to the story of how Malaysia succeeded where Indonesia is currently failing spectacularly. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand why some things only Malaysia can pull off. Both Malaysia and Indonesia started from similar places after independence. Both were former colonies trying to rebuild their economies. Both had natural resources. Both wanted to prove themselves on the world stage. But the paths they took, completely different. And the results speak for themselves. Look at the numbers. Malaysia's GDP per capita sits at $11,867. Indonesia's $4,925. That's less than half. When you adjust for purchasing power, Malaysia reaches $38,729 while Indonesia manages $16,448. The gap is massive. But it's not just about money. It's about what these countries chose to do with their resources and how they executed their visions. And nowhere is this more obvious than in their attempts to build new capital cities. In the early 1990s, Malaysia faced a problem. Kuala Lumpur was getting too crowded. Traffic was insane. Government buildings were scattered everywhere. So Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad proposed something bold. Build a completely new administrative capital from scratch. The critics went crazy. They called it a vanity project. A waste of money. An expensive monument to one man's ego. But Malaysia didn't just talk about it. They actually did it. Construction of Putrajaya started in August 1995 on former rubber and oil palm plantations. The entire project cost about $8 billion. And here's what's remarkable. 90% of the materials were sourced locally. Malaysian companies designed it. Malaysian companies built it. This wasn't just about building a city. It was about proving Malaysian capability. The first government staff moved to Putrajaya in 1999. By 2005, all major ministries had relocated. The city was designed for 350,000 people with 38% green space. They built the stunning pink-domed Putra Mosque. The Perdana Putra complex that houses the Prime Minister's office. The Palace of Justice. All completed on schedule. Was it perfect? No, some people initially called it too quiet or criticized the cost. But here's the thing. Putrajaya functions exactly as intended. Government operations run smoothly. Civil servants actually live there. The city hosts national events. Foreign diplomats visit regularly. It's not a ghost town. It's a working administrative capital that successfully decentralized government functions from Kuala Lumpur. Now let's talk about Indonesia's attempt. In 2019, President Joko Widodo announced Indonesia would move its capital from Jakarta to a brand new city in East Kalimantan called Nusantara. The reasoning made sense. Jakarta is sinking at 30 centimeters per year. Experts predict a third of the city will be underwater by 2050. Overcrowding is severe. Flooding is constant. Moving made logical sense. The initial plan called for a $33 billion investment, with 80% supposed to come from private investors. Construction officially began in 2022. The goal was to inaugurate the city by August 2024 for Indonesia's Independence Day celebration. Here's what actually happened. By August 2024, Nusantara managed a scaled-back Independence Day ceremony with only 1,300 guests instead of the planned 8,000. Most government buildings were incomplete. The presidential palace was still under construction. Office complexes for civil servants weren't ready. The planned relocation of over 10,000 civil servants got postponed from March to July, then to September, and then delayed even further. The money situation is even worse. Indonesia has attracted less than 50 trillion rupiah in total investments, all from local companies and state-owned institutions. Foreign investors. Basically zero. The original plan needed 80% private investment. They're nowhere close. Fast forward to 2025. The new president, Prabowo Subianto, slashed the Nusantara budget from $2.4 billion in 2024 down to $850 million in 2025. For 2026, only $365 million is allocated. That's less than a third of what officials requested. The two top officials overseeing the entire project resigned just 2 months before the scheduled inauguration. Think about that. The people in charge quit before the opening. Currently, only about 2,000 civil servants and 8,000 construction workers live in Nusantara. The target was 1.2 million residents by 2030. Local shop owners report income dropping by half because there's nobody there. The city is already being called a ghost town, and it's not even officially opened yet. So what's the difference? Why did Malaysia succeed while Indonesia is struggling? First, realistic planning and timeline. Malaysia started construction in 1995 and completed the main phase by 2005. 10 years. They didn't rush. Indonesia's decision to relocate was announced in 2019 with construction beginning in 2022 and a target inauguration of 2024. That's 2 years from breaking ground to hosting Independence Day. Completely unrealistic for a project of this scale. Funding strategy is crucial. Malaysia committed to funding Putrajaya primarily through government and state-owned company investment. Petronas, the national oil company, contributed significantly. They knew from the start this would be mostly public funding, and they budgeted accordingly. Indonesia's plan relied on 80% private investment from the beginning. But why would private investors pour money into an unfinished city in the middle of the rainforest with no guarantee of returns? Especially when the project faced delays, leadership changes, and budget cuts. The funding model was fundamentally flawed. Execution and follow-through separate success from failure. When Malaysia committed to Putrajaya, they followed through despite the Asian financial crisis. The 1997 crisis slowed development slightly, but it didn't stop the project. Malaysia continued building. Indonesia's project is already seeing massive budget cuts and delays while officials publicly question its viability. Local expertise and materials made a difference. Malaysia used 90% local materials and local companies for Putrajaya. This reduced costs, created domestic jobs, and proved Malaysian engineering capability. The entire project became a showcase for Malaysian construction. Indonesia brought in international consultants and struggled with coordination among different stakeholders. But the capital city story is just one example. This pattern repeats across different sectors. Let's talk semiconductors. Malaysia is the world's 6th largest exporter of semiconductors and handles 13% of global semiconductor assembly, testing, and packaging. The electrical and electronics sector represents 40% of Malaysia's total exports, generating 575 billion ringgit in revenue in 2023. Companies like Intel, AMD, Texas Instruments, Infineon, and ST Microelectronics have major operations in Malaysia. Malaysian companies like Vitrox, Greytech, Pentamaster, and Inari are now delivering sophisticated equipment solutions for advanced chip production. Malaysia has evolved from basic assembly to becoming a crucial node in the global semiconductor supply chain. The sector employs over 100,000 people in high-skilled jobs. Malaysia is positioning itself as a regional hub for semiconductor design and artificial intelligence development, moving beyond just packaging and testing into higher-value activities. Indonesia has natural resources and a huge population but hasn't developed a comparable high-tech manufacturing ecosystem. The workforce remains largely concentrated in informal and traditional sectors. Infrastructure for advanced manufacturing is limited. While Indonesia talks about moving up the value chain, Malaysia is actually doing it. Infrastructure development shows the same pattern. Malaysia built the Petronas Twin Towers between 1993 and 1998. At 452 meters tall with 88 floors each, they became the world's tallest buildings from 1996 to 2004. They remain the world's tallest twin towers today. The project required moving 500 truckloads of earth every night to dig 30 meters below the surface. The foundation involved the single largest continuous concrete pour in Malaysian history. 13,200 cubic meters of concrete was poured continuously for 54 hours per tower. The superstructure construction began in April 1994. The towers were completed in June 1996. Due to the high cost of importing steel, Malaysian engineers used a radical design of super high-strength reinforced concrete instead. This made the towers heavier but more cost-effective and better at reducing sway. The entire project was designed by American architect Cesar Pelli, but engineered and constructed by Malaysian and Asian contractors. One tower was built by Japanese company Hazama Corporation, the other by South Korea's Samsung C&T. The Petronas towers cost about 6 billion ringgit. They were completed on schedule during the Asian financial crisis. Today, they're Malaysia's most iconic landmark, housing offices, a shopping mall, a concert hall, and serving as a symbol of Malaysian ambition and capability. Indonesia has built impressive infrastructure too, but the execution and completion records differ. Projects often face delays, cost overruns, and coordination challenges. The difference isn't capability. It's consistency and follow-through. Economic structure reveals deeper patterns. Malaysia's economy leans heavily towards services and high-tech industries. Services contribute 53.6% of GDP. Industry contributes 37.6% with a focus on electronics, petroleum, natural gas, and pharmaceuticals. These are high value-added sectors with good profit margins. Indonesia has a more balanced structure, but a significant portion remains in lower value-added sectors. Agriculture still constitutes 13.7% of Indonesia's GDP. While agriculture is important, it typically generates less economic value per worker than advanced manufacturing or services. Malaysia's exports in 2024 totaled about 1.5 trillion ringgit, roughly $350 billion. Major exports include integrated circuits, semiconductors, palm oil, petroleum products, and liquefied natural gas. High-tech products make up around $66 billion of exports, third highest in ASEAN. Indonesia's exports focus more on commodities. Coal briquettes and palm oil are major exports. These are profitable now but less aligned with future economic trends, especially as the world moves toward green energy. Malaysia exports the second largest volume of palm oil globally after Indonesia, but Malaysia has also diversified into semiconductors and advanced manufacturing. The ease of doing business matters enormously. Malaysia ranks 12th globally in ease of doing business according to some measures. Regulatory procedures are relatively streamlined. The government actively works to attract foreign investment with clear incentives and support. Indonesia has made improvements but still faces bureaucratic complexity. Many remote areas lack adequate infrastructure and digital connectivity. Regulatory processes can be challenging. This affects everything from starting a business to executing large infrastructure projects. Education and human capital development create long-term advantages. Malaysia has invested heavily in education and technical training. The workforce has skills needed for high-tech manufacturing. Universities produce engineers and technical graduates who can work in semiconductor fabs and electronics companies. Indonesia struggles with uneven access to education and training. Many areas have limited educational infrastructure. The technical skill base for advanced manufacturing isn't as developed. This makes it harder to attract high-tech foreign investment or to move up the industrial value chain. Geographic advantages play a role too. Malaysia's location on major shipping routes between the Indian Ocean and South China Sea has made it a natural logistics hub. The Straits of Malacca are among the world's most important shipping lanes. This geographic position has been leveraged effectively for trade and manufacturing. Malaysia's smaller size actually helps with infrastructure development and governance. It's easier to build transportation networks and utilities across a smaller geographic area. Indonesia's vast archipelago of over 17,000 islands creates massive infrastructure challenges. Connecting and developing such a dispersed nation is exponentially harder. Think about what a foreign manufacturer considers when deciding where to build a factory. Can they reliably get electricity 24/7? Are roads good enough to transport materials? Is there a port or airport nearby? Can they hire skilled workers? Will government processes be predictable? Is the regulatory environment stable? Malaysia scores well on these factors. Indonesia scores lower. This directly affects where companies invest their billions of dollars and thousands of jobs. Let's address something important. This comparison isn't about saying one country is better than another. Both Malaysia and Indonesia have strengths and weaknesses. Both have achieved remarkable things since independence. Both face ongoing challenges. The point is to understand why similar countries that started from similar positions have diverged so dramatically in some areas. Understanding those differences provides lessons for development policy everywhere. The lesson isn't that Malaysia is perfect and Indonesia is failing at everything. The lesson is that consistent execution matters more than grand visions. That realistic planning beats ambitious promises. That follow-through determines success more than initial announcements. That developing human capital and infrastructure takes decades of sustained effort. That economic diversification provides resilience. Looking forward, what happens next? For Nusantara, several scenarios are possible. Maybe Indonesia doubles down on the commitment, finds the funding, and successfully completes the city over the next decade. That would prove the critics wrong and demonstrate renewed execution capability. Maybe the project limps along with minimal funding, becoming a partially completed city that never reaches its potential. This seems increasingly likely given current budget trajectories and lack of private investment. Maybe a future government abandons Nusantara entirely, either officially or through de facto neglect. The buildings sit empty. The investment is written off as a costly mistake. This would be the worst outcome but not impossible. For Malaysia, the challenge is maintaining the execution capability that brought success. Resting on past achievements leads to stagnation. Competition is intensifying. Vietnam is emerging as a manufacturing hub. Thailand is developing its tech sector. Singapore remains formidable. Malaysia needs to keep moving up the value chain. The focus on semiconductor design and artificial intelligence is smart. Continuing to attract high-value foreign investment while developing domestic capabilities is crucial. Addressing infrastructure gaps and improving education quality must continue. For Indonesia, Nusantara might become a cautionary tale or a comeback story. The outcome depends entirely on execution over the next several years. Can they attract the investment? Complete the buildings? Convince civil servants to actually move? Create a functioning city rather than an expensive monument? The broader question is whether Indonesia can develop the consistent execution capability that Malaysia demonstrated with Putrajaya. Single projects can succeed or fail based on many factors. Long-term economic development requires decades of consistent policy implementation, infrastructure investment, and human capital development. Indonesia has advantages Malaysia lacks. The massive population creates a huge domestic market. Natural resources remain abundant. Strategic location offers opportunities. Young demographics provide a growing workforce. The potential is enormous. Realizing that potential requires better execution, better project management, more realistic planning, stronger follow-through, less corruption, more efficient bureaucracy, better infrastructure, improved education. These aren't impossible challenges, but they're not easy either. The capital city comparison crystallizes these broader patterns. Both countries identified a problem. Both proposed building a new administrative capital. Both committed significant resources. But Malaysia delivered while Indonesia is struggling. Why? Better planning. Realistic timelines. Appropriate funding models. Consistent follow-through. Effective project management. These aren't mysterious secrets. They're basic project management principles applied at national scale. Malaysia executed these principles effectively. Indonesia has not, at least not yet with Nusantara. The same patterns appear across other sectors. Semiconductors, infrastructure, education, economic diversification. The execution gap persists. Can Indonesia change? Absolutely. Countries can reform. Capabilities can improve. Execution can get better. But change requires acknowledging current weaknesses, learning from others' successes, and committing to sustained improvement. The next few years will be telling. Will Nusantara become a functioning capital or a ghost city? Will Indonesia successfully move up the value chain or remain commodity dependent? Will Malaysia maintain its semiconductor leadership or lose ground to competitors? Malaysia and Indonesia provide a natural comparison because they're so similar in many ways yet so different in outcomes. Both are Muslim-majority countries in Southeast Asia. Both were colonized. Both gained independence mid-20th century. Both have natural resources. Both are middle-income countries. Yet Malaysia's GDP per capita is more than double Indonesia's. Malaysia's high-tech sector is far more developed. Malaysia's infrastructure is more advanced. Malaysia's execution on major projects is more consistent. Understanding why illuminates development economics more broadly. The lesson generalizes beyond Southeast Asia. Consistent policy implementation matters everywhere. Realistic planning beats over ambitious promises. Human capital development takes decades. Infrastructure investment pays long-term dividends. Economic diversification provides resilience. Effective execution determines success more than grand visions. These principles apply whether you're a Southeast Asian country, an African nation, a Latin American state, or anywhere else. The specifics differ but the fundamentals remain constant. Malaysia succeeded not through magic but through decades of reasonably effective governance, consistent pro-growth policies, strategic investments, and crucially, the ability to actually complete major projects. Putrajaya stands as physical evidence of this execution capability. The Petronas Towers showcase it. The semiconductor industry demonstrates it across an entire sector. Indonesia's Nusantara, at least so far, demonstrates the opposite. Grand vision without execution. Ambitious promises without follow-through. Unrealistic planning without adequate funding. The contrast couldn't be starker. The story of Malaysia and Indonesia is still being written. Both countries have achieved remarkable things. Both face significant challenges. Both have enormous potential. Where they go from here depends on the choices they make and, crucially, how effectively they implement those choices. For now, the comparison is clear. When it comes to executing massive infrastructure projects, developing high-tech industries, and delivering on ambitious national visions, Malaysia has demonstrated capabilities that Indonesia is still working to develop. Putrajaya succeeded where Nusantara is struggling. Malaysian semiconductors dominate while Indonesian chip industry barely exists. Malaysian infrastructure works while Indonesian infrastructure lags. Only Malaysia could pull off what Malaysia has accomplished. Not because Malaysians are superior people, but because Malaysia built institutions, policies, and capabilities that enable consistent execution over decades. That's the real story. Not one project succeeding or failing, but one country building the systematic capability to deliver results again and again. Indonesia can build that capability too. But it requires acknowledging current weaknesses, learning from others' successes, and committing to the hard work of improving execution at every level. Talk is easy. Grand visions are cheap. Actually delivering results. That's what separates success from failure. And that's why, at least for now, some things only Malaysia can do.